Welcome to the Oopa Loopa Cafe, a place where storytellers gather, where old sailors relive their travels, where shamans and mystics reveal their esoteric secrets, where mammoth are hunted and cave walls are turned into art galleries. Some visitors here bring the detective skills of Sherlock Holmes. Some bring ancient tools found in the backyard. Some bring insights into how ancient people lived, loved, died, and were buried. Much of what you will see and hear in this place you won't find in a history book, but you should. This is the Oopa Loopa Cafe, where the heroes of old come alive and legends live again. A place where history is exciting. A place where adventures begin. Come with us and explore.
And welcome to the Oopa Loopa Cafe here on the 29th of January 2013. I'm your host, Rick Osmond. And today we have some very interesting, special little stories for you. We always explore a new thing now and then, and today we're exploring psychology, specifically the stimulus and response theory of psychology. But before we get to that, we have a number of news stories, including one about some rather troubling activities in Mali, as well as one from hackers. Anonymous has taken credit for this one, hacking into a government computer. And we have this story, which is from Henry Kissinger and rather troubling, about a nuclear-armed Iran. And we have a story about Edward Teech, also known as Blackbeard the Pirate. It comes to us from thehollowEarthInsider.com, which also goes pretty much from Auckland to Anchorage. Pretty cool, isn't it? This is this map collates about almost 11,000 users, individual users who have been on The Hollow Earth Insider in the past month. So it's doing well. And then this story. This is about me, actually. Midwestern Epigraphic Society has asked me to speak at their spring conference, which is coming up May 31st, June 1st, June 2nd. So it's kind of exciting for me on that count, at least. This is a story about, not really the movie The Dirty Dozen. It's actually a story about the guy who inspired The Dirty Dozen. Now, The Dirty Dozen starred Lee Marvin and also had Ernest Borgnine, Clint Walker, Charles Bronson, and 8 other stars. But The Dirty Dozen was actually based upon a true story of a real outfit, a bunch of misfits. Now, they weren't hardened criminals as the movie portrayed them, but they were misfits. They'd been in a brig for something or another multiple times, most of them. But the real hero of the movie, the part played by Lee Marvin, was actually a guy by the name of James Albert / Jake McNeice. And Jake McNeice had been a first sergeant at one time, but he'd gotten busted for writing himself too many leave slips. And he was tagged to be an acting sergeant to lead a group of folks to jump behind enemy lines. And as a result, he got 4 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and the Legion of Honor. That's the one at the bottom here. Which was actually awarded to him by the nation of France, because he played such a huge part in their liberation during World War II. However, the sad news is that Jake McNeice has passed away. He led a group of soldiers nicknamed the Filthy 13, not the Dirty Dozen, on a paratroop mission behind German lines in the hours before June 6, 1944, or D-Day, the invasion. The mission was to destroy bridges and prevent German reinforcements from moving into Normandy and retreating forces from leaving. His efforts earned him France's most prestigious decoration. the Legion of Honor. So, Mr. McNeice, Acting Sergeant McNeice, thank you for your service, and you will be missed, as will all the heroes of your generation. Yes, this actually ties back into the stimulus and response. Germany declared war on the United States. The United States did not declare war on Germany. Japan declared war on the United States, and Germany was their ally. So the stimulus was to the U.S., hey, we've got a war on two fronts. And the response was to fight wars on each of the two fronts to the end. And they did. However, stimulus and response extends into a lot of things. And coming up right here in just a few seconds is a short lesson in stimulus and response. Most stimulus comes in the form of rewards when people do something well, or your pet does something that you wish them to do. You reward them. Sometimes, though, it's not a consistent reinforcement of the rewards. Sometimes there's a thing called partial reinforcement, another part of the whole theory within psychology. I don't know how these folks trained their pets, but it is definitely stimulus and response. Here's our off the wall for today.
Bang, bang. Bang. Chocolate. Bang. Good puppies.
Finny. Bang. Good boy. Good boy, Finny.
Bang! You faker! You faker!
Tell you that you guys are to die for. So, bang! You killed her.
Just thinking.
Cool. Get it.
That.
And that's a pretty good lesson in stimulus and response. Now, of course, there are other stimuli, and other responses, and other stories to go along with it, of course. One of the stories that kind of goes along with it has to do with Edward Teech, also known as Blackbeard the Pirate. Now, Mr. Teech, Captain Teech, once he got his own ship, captured his own ship, raided up and down the coast into the Caribbean, pretty much all over. But he earned the ire of a number of officials, including the governor of South Carolina. And Mr. Teech was surprised by what appeared to be an empty or nearly empty ship, but it had a lot of troops below decks. And Mr. Teech was surprised and overrun. And the captain of the attacking ship took Mr. Teech's head home on a pike. So the stimulus was to raid the coast, and the response was to kill the raider. We're going to get into a lot of stimulus and response situations throughout today's show. One of them has to do with this hackers into the government files, government websites, specifically the United States Justice Department. It has to do with the death of one Aaron Swartz. Aaron committed suicide at age 26. But at age 14, he invented what became RSS, or basically a system to automatically forward certain internet content to another web page. So he was a brilliant young man, but he came under fire from the Justice Department for allegedly downloading files from a scientific resource center called JSTORs at MIT. And apparently he downloaded a lot of them. And I say allegedly. And they were going to put him away for 54 years for that, or threatened to. And certainly probably could have, given the level of defense that he could have mustered on his own. But he just bowed out instead. Now, his death, his demise, his suicide has spawned a great deal of retaliation on the part of the folks who supported Aaron Swartz, who respected him, and probably learned a few things from him. And the group I'm speaking of is called Anonymous. They call themselves Anonymous. We might as well call them Anonymous too, because we don't know who they are. But their response has been, so far, pretty much just taunts. But they're taunts that are adequate to get the attention of the United States government, because it falls under what is considered cyber warfare. They took control of government websites. Now, Anonymous says, and they may be right, that the Justice Department trumped up charges that, you know, a murderer might get out after 10 years, sometimes less. A child rapist, you know, pick the worst crime you can think of. All this guy did was download files, and the charge was violating the terms of agreement with the website. A victimless crime. And in fact, the authority that holds all those scientific papers, JSTORs, part of, or at least at MIT, they weren't going to press charges. But the government was. So, anyway, Mr. Swartz took his own life, and Anonymous took it upon themselves to retaliate. So, stimulus and response. Don't know what the end response will be from Anonymous, and there may not be an end. Who knows? They're pretty much really hard to track, extremely hard to track, and they're bright, and they haven't yet, to my knowledge, done anything that could actually hurt somebody. But they're capable of it. And all at the flip of a switch or push of a key or click of a mouse. They seem to be very, very adept at things like this. Now, that's kind of the lead-in, but we'll get into that in the second segment here. What is really interesting to me is that the response is anonymous. The stimulus was the trumped up charges on Aaron Swartz. There are a whole bunch of stimulus and response connections in today's show. I think you'll enjoy it. I certainly hope so. And we also have, of course, the news stories that I mentioned earlier. And we'll finish up with what may be a little common sense video. So stick with us. This is the Oopa Loopa Cafe, and we are in the stimulus and response mode today. Stick around. And one other announcement. Later this week, Friday, I believe it will be, we'll have an interview with the publisher of Ancient American Magazine, Mr. Wayne May. I spoke to Wayne earlier today, and he will be with us. So I hope you'll look forward to that as much as I do. I really enjoy speaking with Wayne. And of course, I'm still kind of excited about the MES conference, Midwestern Epigraphic Society Conference. Anyway, Oopa Loopa Cafe, stick with us. We'll be back right after these messages. And welcome back to the Oopa Loopa Cafe here on the 29th of January 2013. This story is about the rebels in Mali. Now, they have destroyed a lot of documents in the city of Timbuktu. And first, let's go to what is Mali. Mali is a landlocked area of Western Africa, Northwestern Africa. It is truly an ancient country, and it has been around more or less in its present form and geography for about 800 years. Before that, it was a desert nomad's paradise. There was nothing there. However, in ancient times, it became a trade route for salt, slaves, number of other commodities that could be transported by caravan across the desert. And of course, it was also a very long-term Islamic country, pretty much from the inception of Islam. Now, parts of Mali are actually quite beautiful if you like desert and if you like buttes like these are. But the ancient history of Mali goes back 1,000 years or so. And these particular documents were destroyed by the retreating rebels. And there were nearly 1 million such manuscripts before they got started with their destruction. Now, this kind of harkens back to a different time. It harkens back to when the Taliban took power in Afghanistan. And the Taliban took it upon themselves to destroy this idol. This is a Buddha that was about 175 feet tall. And they opened up on it with explosives, artillery shells, anything they could to destroy it, despite a lot of politicking by other Muslims to preserve it. The Taliban were having none of that. So they destroyed what could have been their biggest tourist draw in all of Afghanistan. They blew it up. However, it's still stimulus and response. The Taliban are out of power and generally on the run, even in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. So when you threaten somebody with that type of firepower, you end up with a response. Stimulus, response.
Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here, watch this. Shut up. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
To the President of the United States of America, we are anonymous. We would like to ask you, are you happy with what you have allowed the United States to become? The entire country a war zone. People standing up for their rights and the city governments allowing the brutal beating and arresting the citizens across America. By allowing this to happen, you are a disgrace to the presidency. Any past president would put their political careers aside and focus on the city streets of his own country. So far you have done nothing about the thousands of people arrested in the city streets for exercising their First Amendment rights. Because you are too busy campaigning for your second term as president. Stop and listen to the people you took an oath to uphold. Stop treating the people of America like terrorists with the building of FEMA camps to house Americans that stand up against political control. Mr. President, you had a dream of change when you were first elected, but clearly you have sold out to the corporate injustices that every American involved in the Occupy movement are speaking out against. You, Mr. President, are a failure to America. In fact, you are building an army of angry Americans that will not allow the government to control every little aspect of their lives. It is only a matter of time before the people of America turn the tables and focus their revolution on true freedom. And they will fight for it. By allowing the indefinite detention bill to pass, you will turn every citizen of America into a soldier, and the people of the United States will seek justice. America is not a war zone, but you are going to allow it to become one if you do not address the issues at hand. This is a message that will not be unheard. Mr. President, if you pass the indefinite detention bill, you will be throwing the United States Constitution out the window, and by doing so will only result in the failure of the United States. There are not enough people in the U.S. Armed Forces to stop every American citizen that will be closing in on the government buildings if you do not put the U.S. Constitution first. By allowing this bill to pass, you will make every American citizen anonymous. And for that injustice, the people will rise against you and scream, "Give me freedom," or "Give me death." We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Teachers, no facts, no freaks, no skaters, no tweakers, no truth, no fun. Here's popcorn, here's magazines, here's milkshake, here's blue jeans, here's patty bars, here's long fit wax, here's football, here's baseball.
But we begin tonight with a tale of two speeches, both from the same man, both from President Obama. One speech that could have been billed as a ballad to the Constitution, a proclamation of American values, a repudiation of the lawless behavior of the last presidential administration, and another speech announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Remarkably, President Obama today made both of those speeches simultaneously. Standing inside the National Archives in front of the actual original Constitution, President Obama delivered a blistering critique of the Bush administration, in which he called their actions and their legacy literally a mess.
Our government made a series of hasty decisions. Poorly planned, haphazard approach. Too often, we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford. Our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. The decisions that were made over the last 8 years established an ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable.
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable. Ouch. Then, moments later, he announced his own. his own ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. It came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubinos to take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes.
No,
I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes, in some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law.
But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law and call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future? How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy, for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law. We must have clear, defensible, and lawful standards for those who fall into this category. We must have a thorough process of periodic review so that any prolonged detention is carefully evaluated and justified. Our goal is to construct a legitimate legal framework for the remaining Guantanamo detainees that cannot be transferred. Our goal is not to avoid a legitimate legal framework. In our constitutional system, prolonged detention should not be the decision of any one man. If and when we determine that the United States must hold individuals to keep them from carrying out an act of war, we will do so within a system that involves judicial and congressional oversight. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will, what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. What's that somebody said about ad hoc legal strategies? Just for context here, in the United Kingdom, where there isn't even a Bill of Rights, there's been a major debate about whether people can be held in preventive detention. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted 3 months to be the outer limit for how long anyone could be held. There was a big political fight about it. Parliament ended up limiting that power to 28 days. 28 days is still the longest period of preventive detention that's allowed under law in any comparable democracy anywhere in the world. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now, in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years until the threat of your future criminal behavior passes. Prolonged detention, he's calling it. This was a beautiful speech from President Obama today with patriotic, moving, even poetic language about the rule of law and the Constitution, and one of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people.
Well, two extremes there, I think. But for every stimulus and response, you keep getting ping-pong. So here's what Anonymous did recently.
Shall we play a game?
Statement from USSC.gov in response to death of Aaron Swartz. Citizens of the world. Anonymous has observed for some time now the trajectory of justice in the United States with growing concern. We have marked the departure of this system from the noble ideals in which it was born and enshrined. We have seen the erosion of due process, the dilution of constitutional rights, the usurpation of the rightful authority of courts by the discretion of prosecutors. We have seen how the law is wielded less and less to uphold justice, and more to exercise control, authority and power in the interests of oppression or personal gain. We have been watching and waiting. 2 weeks ago today, a line was crossed. 2 weeks ago today, Aaron Swartz was killed. Killed because he faced an impossible choice. Killed because he was forced into playing a game he could not win, a twisted and distorted perversion of justice, a game where the only winning move was not to play. Anonymous immediately convened an emergency council to discuss our response to this tragedy. After much heavy-hearted discussion, the decision was upheld to engage the United States Department of Justice and its associated executive branches in a game of a similar nature, a game in which the only winning move is not to play.
It hasn't learned. Is Aaron going to make it play itself? Learn, goddammit. Greetings, Professor Falcon. Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. How about a nice game of chess?
Last year the Federal Bureau of Investigation reveled in porcine glee at its successful infiltration of certain elements of Anonymous. This infiltration was achieved through the use of the same tactics which led to Aaron Swartz's death. It would not have been possible were it not for the power of federal prosecutors to thoroughly destroy the lives of any activists they apprehend through the very real threat of highly disproportionate sentencing. As a result of the FBI's infiltration and entrapment tactics, several more of our brethren now face similar disproportionate persecution. The balance of their lives hanging on the severely skewed scales of a broken justice system. We have felt within our hearts a burning rage in reaction to these events, but we have not allowed ourselves to be drawn into a foolish and premature response. We have bidden our time, operating in the shadows, adapting our tactics and honing our abilities. We have allowed the FBI and its masters of government, both the puppet and the shadow government that controls it, to believe they had struck a crippling blow to our infrastructure, that they had demoralized us, paralyzed us with paranoia and fear. We have held our tongue and waited. With Aaron's death we can wait no longer. The time has come to show the United States Department of Justice and its affiliates the true meaning of infiltration. The time has come to give this system a taste of its own medicine. The time has come for them to feel the helplessness and fear that comes with being forced into a game where the odds are stacked against them. This website was chosen due to the symbolic nature of its purpose. The federal sentencing guidelines, which enable prosecutors to cheat citizens of their constitutionally guaranteed right to a fair trial by a jury of their peers. The federal sentencing guidelines, which are in clear violation of the 8th Amendment protection against cruel and unusual punishments. This website was also chosen due to the nature of its visitors. It is far from the only government asset we control, and we have exercised such control for quite some time. There has been a lot of fuss recently in the technological media regarding such operations as Red October, the widespread use of vulnerable browsers, and the availability of zero-day exploits for these browsers and their plugins. None of this comes, of course, as any surprise to us, but it is perhaps good that those within the information security industry are making the extent of these threats more widely understood. Still, there is nothing quite as educational as a well-conducted demonstration. Through this website and various others that will remain unnamed, we have been conducting our own infiltration. We did not restrict ourselves like the FBI to one high-profile compromise. We are far more ambitious, and far more capable. Over the last 2 weeks we have wound down this operation, removed all traces of leakware from the compromised systems, and taken down the injection apparatus used to detect and exploit vulnerable machines. We have enough fissile material for multiple warheads. Today we are launching the first of these. Operation Last Resort has begun. Warhead USDOJ-LEA 2013 AEE-256 is primed and armed. It has been quietly distributed to numerous mirrors over the last few days and is available for download from this website now. We encourage all anonymous to syndicate this file as widely as possible. The contents are various and we won't ruin the speculation by revealing them. Suffice it to say, everyone has secrets, and some things are not meant to be public. At a regular interval commencing today, we will choose one media outlet and supply them with heavily redacted partial contents of the file. Any media outlet switching to be eligible for this program must include within their reporting a means of secure communications. We have not taken this action lightly nor without consideration of the possible consequences, should we be forced to reveal the trigger key to this warhead. We understand that there will be collateral damage. We appreciate that many who work within the justice system believe in the principles that have been lost, corrupted, or abandoned, but they do not bear the full responsibility for the damages caused by their occupation. It is our hope that this warhead need never be detonated. However, in order for there to be a peaceful resolution to this crisis, certain things need to happen. There must be reform of outdated and poorly envisioned legislation written to be so broadly applied as to make a felony crime out of violation of terms of service, creating in effect vast swathes of crimes and allowing for selective punishment. There must be reform of mandatory minimum sentencing. There must be a return to proportionality of punishment with respect to actual harm caused, and consideration of motive and mens rea. The inalienable right to a presumption of innocence and the recourse to trial and possibility of exoneration must be returned to its sacred status, and not gambled away by pre-trial bargaining in the face of overwhelming sentences, unaffordable justice and disfavorable odds. Laws must be upheld and selectively, and not used as a weapon of government to make examples of those it deems threatening to its power. For good reason the statue of Lady Justice is blindfolded. No more should her innocence be besmirched, her scales tipped, nor her sword hand guided. Furthermore, there must be a solemn commitment to freedom of the internet, this last great common space of humanity, and to the common ownership of information to further the common good. We do not expect to be negotiated with, we do not desire to be negotiated with. We understand that due to the actions we take, we exclude ourselves from the system within which solutions are found. There are others who serve that purpose, people far more respectable than us, people whose voices emerge from the light and not the shadows. These voices are already making clear the reforms that have been necessary for some time and are outright required now. It is these people that the justice system, the government, and law enforcement must engage with. Their voices are already ringing strong with a chorus of determined resolution. We demand only that this chorus is not ignored. We demand the government does not make the mistake of hoping that time will dampen its ringing, that they can ride out this wave of determination, that business as usual can continue after a sufficient period of lip service and back-patting. Not this time. This time there will be change, and there will be chaos.
And now for just a little bit more of a measured response. Still a response from a different direction, but asking to do the same thing.
It was in the oath I took that I would, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. I could not take the office without taking the oath, nor was it my view that I might take an oath to get power and break the oath in using that power. Abraham Lincoln. I want to talk about the NDAA. This is the National Defense Authorization Act. This is an annual bill that passes through Congress and signed into law by the President. It appropriates funds to the Department of Defense. And like any other bill, it's amazingly complex. There's a tremendous amount of sections and amendments involved with this bill. And for the first time in 2012, we saw some language that many people have said could lead to the indefinite detention of American citizens on U.S. soil. Now, this was debated in the congressional record and by the administration. So don't think that this was just a mistake. This was something that on the floor of Congress and in the White House was talked about. After all the debate was done, the language didn't change, and the bill was passed by Congress and signed into law by the President. And when the President signed it into law, he actually issued a signing statement, and I actually want to read that for everybody. I want to clarify that my administration will not authorize the indefinite military detention without trial of American citizens. Indeed, I believe doing so would break with our most important traditions and values as a nation. My administration will interpret Section 1021 in a manner that ensures that any detention it authorizes complies with the Constitution, the laws of war, and all other applicable law. Sounds great, right? But what's funny is that signing statements have no legality to them. The President just signed this into law, which says you can detain American citizens indefinitely. So basically, a signing statement's a promise that I won't do it. But what I find even more interesting is looking back at the congressional record. There's actually was an initial statement included in the bill, and I want to read this for you. This was said by Senator Levin. The initial bill reported by the committee included language expressly precluding the detention of citizens or lawful resident aliens of the United States on the basis of conduct taking place within the United States, except to the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States. The administration asked that this language be removed from the bill. So I'm confused. The administration asked that language be removed from the bill that would prevent an American citizen from being indefinitely detained. Congress complied and removed that language. Then the President signs the bill, and in his signing statement says, I'm kind of concerned because this bill says I can detain people, but I just want to let you know I'm not going to do it. What's going on? I mean, what are we supposed to believe? Which statement? The one that happens behind closed doors that says, hey, remove this language, or this public statement that says, hey, I'm not going to do this? Now let's fast forward to the end of 2012, and the 2013 NDAA passed Congress, and in early 2013 was signed into law by the President. And nowhere in his signing statements did he talk about anything regarding indefinite detention. But many people on both sides of the aisle have said that the vague language included in the 2013 NDAA still could lead to the indefinite detention of American citizens. Now, when this was going through Congress, there were several senators and members of Congress that disagreed with this and tried to change this language. And it was the Feinstein-Lee Amendment. And I want to read for you a section of the Feinstein-Lee Amendment. An authorization to use military force, a declaration of war, or any similar authority shall not authorize the detention without charge or trial of a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States apprehended in the United States, unless an act of Congress expressly authorizes such detention. So this amendment was passed by the Senate, and it was removed by the House before the House voted on it, and the President signed the NDAA into law 2013 without any Feinstein-Lee amendment included. What's interesting, I think, when you're looking at the debates that were going on in Congress and with the administration, is they seem to be debating over who has the right to indefinitely detain American citizens on U.S. soil. And I'm sitting here looking at this saying, I don't think either of them have the right to detain American citizens on U.S. soil. That's what we have a Constitution for. Our rights to due process are protected in the Constitution. But they're going to tell you that, well, these are wartime powers we're talking about. But we haven't declared war since World War II. Oh, but we're at war with terror. We're at war with an ideology. When is this war going to ever end? Is terror going to hold up a white flag? For this duration of this endless war, we're going to suspend our civil liberties? This is absurd. So the same government that can indefinitely detain you is the same government that's going to label you an enemy combatant without having to go in front of a judge and prove any amount of evidence. So what does it mean to be labeled enemy combatant? I mean, what is the definition of that? Am I an enemy combatant for making a video exercising my First Amendment right? Or for you defending your Second Amendment right? I mean, these are very vague terms. And this is a concern. This is why we have a Constitution. It protects us. These people take an oath to preserve and defend the Constitution. This is an oath that all public officials take. This is a very similar oath that our men and women in uniform take. And our politicians send them to go and do a job. And some of them come home. Some of them come home hurt. And some of them don't come home at all. And they die defending the Constitution and upholding the oath that they took. We're not asking our politicians to die for their oath. We're asking them to just live by their oath. To those who argue we would never use indefinite detention against innocent American citizens, I ask you to not look too far into the past. In 1942, FDR issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized the detention of 120,000 people of Japanese descent living in the United States. Of the 120,000 people placed in internment camps, 2/3 were American citizens. That's 80,000 American citizens protected by the United States Constitution, who might argue that a promise to never detain innocent American citizens is an empty promise indeed.